Well, it's been a long week, and our listeners are wondering, is Nebraska going to a bowl game? We will discuss it in our Mailbag show next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday. Thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Head to FanDuel.com to get started.
Okay, welcome in. It is Thursday. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is here with me as Nebraska gets ready tomorrow to head to Columbus, Ohio for the meeting. Big noon kickoff, 11 a.m. Central. All of the guys, Matt, Reggie, Rob, Urban, they're all going to be there. Ohio State is celebrating the 10-year anniversary of its 2014 national championship. So Urban Meyer has multiple reasons to be in Columbus this week. Nebraska has one reason to be there, and that is to try to turn things around in a big way after the Huskers' loss at Indiana last week. Been an interesting week, Connor, in Lincoln so far. Matt Rhule is going to meet with the media today, late morning after the Huskers practice, and we will hear what he has to say about how this week has gone. We have received a lot of questions. It was an active week for the Locked On Nebraska mailbag, so thanks to everybody for sending them in. We got questions on X, we got questions on email, we got questions on YouTube. We're going to go right away to a big picture question from, this one was from Mitch in GI, and we heard this one in a couple of different ways. Basically, it comes down to this. Is Nebraska going to a bowl game this year? Huskers are 5-2.
I believe they are. I famously on my radio show last year was pretty much telling people to book their trips to wherever they wanted to go when Nebraska was 5-3, and felt pretty good that they would win one out of their last four.
It should have happened.
It should have happened. It should have happened multiple times. The schedule was daunting, but they had a chance really to win all those games. Didn't win any of them. Now they have one more game of buffer room and 5 games left, and they're 5-2 right now. I guess, to be fair, they were 5-1, so they could have clinched it this past weekend as well, and didn't end up doing so. So people start getting sweaty. I think Nebraska is going to win 6. I think they're going to win 7, like at least 7. I think there's 2 more wins for Nebraska on the schedule. And if you want to flip the narrative that has been this week, maybe you win 3 out of your last 5 games. I also think that is still doable, but I understand people's hesitation right now with this team.
So when we did our midseason picks, our midseason conversations in that bye week after the Rutgers game, I picked Nebraska to go 8-4. I picked Nebraska to lose against Indiana by 6 points. So that was off. It does make me reconsider some things about the last 5 games of the season, and if there are really 3 wins left for Nebraska, which would be 3 wins in Nebraska's last 4 games, because I'm not picking Nebraska to beat Ohio State. We're giving a sneak peek of our predictions show on Friday. I already picked this on an Ohio radio program or podcast that I appeared on Wednesday. So you can hear the score if you listen to that. I don't know when it airs or what station or who the host was, but what city it was based out of. Can't tell you any of that stuff, or you can just listen to
Ohio. Do we know that?
It was in Ohio. Yeah, it was in Ohio. That's what it said on my phone when the call came in, when the text came in the other day asking me to do this. I said yes, and we talked on Wednesday. I will tell you that score on our Friday show. Tune in for that. I'm going to still say 8 wins. I know it's maybe a little bit, it looks like fuzzy math at this point, but it always looks worse when things are going bad. And it's probably going to look even worse a week from now. But I believe that this team will turn things around. This question from Mitch was followed up. We might as well just get to a couple others that were very much on the same topic, or at least one other that I picked out from Curtis via email. He said he believes that all of us got way ahead of ourselves in going from wanting Nebraska to make a bowl into talking about the college football playoff. Yeah, I'd agree with you, Curtis. Do we still think the future is bright and trust in the process? Oh, yes. And then there was the question from Scott via email who said, will this 2-week stretch, he's talking about Indiana and Ohio State, lead to another bowlless season? I can't see them recovering after this, and I had such high hopes. So, hey, stay with it. Trust the process. Yes. Trust that Matt Rhule, the guy that you believed in a week ago, is going to find a way to push the buttons that get Nebraska out of this, and that they are going to have a November that's unlike the November we saw a year ago.
Let me just quickly throw that logic right back in the emailer's face, right? So we didn't. I don't think anybody saw the loss like that coming, right? We were kind of people were kind of riding high. Nebraska was 5-1. I picked them to win. I know there was a lot of other people out there who thought that they would win or thought the game would be close, whatever. And you already baked into the cake the loss to Ohio State coming up this weekend. So if you didn't think 56-7 was possible, well, they can flip the script again. It's just flipped it back the other way. It's a long college football season. It's 12 games. You get those tests. And Nebraska took a big fat F on their most recent test to Indiana. Really, really bad. But it's not something you can't recover from. It's not like they are still the same pieces that they were 10 days ago or 30 days ago. It's just they have to find that. And whatever the rut is and whatever they can get out of them, that's the coach's responsibility to find that. I do think they could find it. Am I less confident that they can now than I was before, than after, the Indiana game? Yeah, of course, less confident. Everyone should be less confident, but it could flip. Whatever that means for this team is, I think they could find their way to a couple more.
What scares Nebraska fans, obviously, here is that, yes, the script can flip, but the script for Nebraska over the last 8 years has always flipped in this direction, where you've had hope. If you've had hope in the seasons where Nebraska has had hope and something bad has happened, then the ceiling has caved in on Nebraska. And there have rarely been instances where there has not been an instance where Nebraska has been able to right the ship to a point where it fought back and made it to the postseason. Sometimes things have gotten better in November. Look at 2018 when Nebraska started 0-8, 0-7.
6. Yeah.
6-0-6.
Or no, it might have been more.
The Bethune-Cookman, that was the win that got them off the hook there. Anyway, Nebraska won 4 of their last 6. Like that was a year where Nebraska was able to turn the tide in a positive way. It was just too late to make it into a bowl game. It can happen. I think it will. I think this will be the year that Nebraska does enough in the month of November, has a good November, and makes it to the postseason.
Yep.
All right. Let's get to a question from Justin on Twitter. He asks if Matt Rhule's NFL experience is a liability. Justin says, Rhule is known to transform college programs, but that all happened before he became an NFL head coach. Rhule often mentions now how things were done during his time in the NFL, but the college game is very different.
Oh, I guess I never thought about the question that way. His NFL experience is not a liability, but I think, is Justin trying to say the time in which he was in the NFL, specifically the college game, changed so much during that time, and now he's come back to a game that is a different game? Am I interpreting that the right way?
I think you can interpret it that way. I kind of interpret this question to mean, has Matt Rhule changed his ways? Did the NFL change him? And he was one coach when he went to the NFL who was adept at turning around a college program, and then he became something else when he was in the NFL, and now it's a different mix. He's a different coach, so he's not in a position to turn around a college program. I don't think so. I think he's the same guy. I think he refers to the NFL because it's part of what he's learned.
Yep.
Like everything that he's done in his career plays into who he is today and what he's learned. But I don't believe that the NFL has made him a worse coach for college. No,
I don't either. I think, it gets the right person a lot of perspective to go through what he went through in that situation, whether, however much of it was his fault or whatever it might have been. And then the whole COVID situation as well. Like that was tough. So I appreciate the perspective. I think that he's gained from that. And I think he's talked about that before. I will say, I mean, to the point that I was sort of thinking of, the game is the college game is different. It is
much different.
It's the transfer portal and it's NIL and, it's harder. It's something we talked about at the very beginning, and it looks easier in some spots to get things off the ground, but the way Matt Rhule's doing it is very different than some of the other ways that have been jump started around the country. And so he's still going to do it his way, regardless of how the game has changed.
It's becoming more like the NFL. I mean, much more like the NFL in terms of the number of coaches you can have working with your players. The paying of players is obviously something that resembles the NFL more than it does the old college system. And then next year you're going to have salaries, revenue share, not just the NIL marketing of players. All of that stuff has existed forever in the NFL, and you deal with the ramifications, the egos, and all of the hard feelings that can go with that, and the need for maturity and how players deal with being rich. That stuff didn't exist in college, or really did not exist in college in the open when Matt Rhule was coaching at Baylor. So the fact that the college game is more like the NFL and that Matt Rhule was not successful as an NFL head coach, I don't put those things together and say that this is hurting him. I think all of it will help him ultimately in the college game.
I'm with you. Plenty more mailbag questions to answer on the other side. Appreciate you guys being with us, making it your first listen. Like and subscribe. Keep asking those questions. We have more mailbag shows to go. We'll be right back on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. All right, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. When you get that hunch in the middle of a game, check out the latest live stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more right there on that same page where you placed your bets. That is on the FanDuel Sportsbook app or at FanDuel.com. Today, we're going to get you started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's when you place your first $5 bet. That is good ROI, Mitch. That is very, very good. $5 bet.
What that means.
Gets you $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's when you place your first $5 bet. Head to FanDuel.com today. That is with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, welcome back. Here we go. We have more mailbag questions. Let's rip through a bunch of them. I want to make sure we get to all of these. Let's go to X, Twitter. Sodaksker, Mitch. Sodaksker says, surprised that Rhule called out the poor blocking on the perimeter when it's obviously been bad for several years. Why did it take an ass whooping to draw attention to it?
Good use of the Isaac Gifford reference there. Nice. The old ass whooping. Been through an ass whooping before. Well, Rhule's talked about this all season.
Yes.
We heard about it at the beginning of the year, how the perimeter blocking was not something that Nebraska was happy with, and it was holding back the run game, and adjustments were needed with especially the newer wide receivers to the program, freshmen, players out of the transfer portal. So the questioner here, Sodaksker, is talking about how perimeter blocking's been bad for several years, and it's not something that first of all, Rhule's only dealing with 2 years, so he's not been holding anything back as he reviews tape from 2022, which he did. This is about his team this year. I don't really see some big like departure from what's normal in the way that he's criticized this. We have another question that's next about the perimeter blocking that I think is an interesting one to dive into. But no, I'm not surprised that Rhule called it out in the way that he did after the Indiana game, because at times it was very bad in the Indiana game, and other times this year it's been varying levels of bad and mediocre.
So let's go right into that next question, then we'll talk about it as a whole. It's from Gene. If the wide receivers can't execute their blocking assignments to the degree that Rhule calls attention to it in the presser, then why don't those wide receivers sit?
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I do think now is the time, after a really, really big loss like that. I do think you sort of, it's kind of an old coach move to just say, all right, depth chart is clear. No, nobody has anything anymore. All right, we're starting all the way over. And if you don't do it in practice starting today, then you're number 2 or you're number like whatever it might be. Like whoever wins this is going to win. Like I think now is sort of the time where you can do that. You have, you've lost by 50. You have everybody's sort of attention in that way. But clearly, I mean, to answer the question, like clearly Nebraska believes and the coaches believe that those receivers can do the job adequately enough and pose enough of a threat to catch the football, even if they lack a little bit in the blocking game or like they wouldn't put them out there consistently all the time. They do bring in Alex Bullock and stuff like that. Like it's not bad on every play. It seems like it is, because on the Saturday against Indiana, Nebraska was pretty much bad on every play. You're like, oh my goodness, what can't they do? What can they do right? So, it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but obviously they believe in those guys and they've been around the college game for a long time. There's no doubt about it. They need to step up, and Rhule treats them like, he calls those guys out. He doesn't have much problem doing that. With specifically, he's talking about Banks and Nair, I think.
Yeah, the problem, or the problem as I see it, or the issue here is that Nebraska has a group of wide receivers, and it's not just the starters, but there are some wide receivers on this roster who are very good at perimeter blocking, and then there are others whose strengths it is to catch the football, and you have to find and play the receivers who you think give you the best chance to do both, the best mix. You can't just say, okay, it's a run play or it's a play where we're running a screen, so we're going to put in the good perimeter blockers. That will quickly get sniffed out by your opponent, and they'll be able to base their calls off of your personnel. So you have to try to be deceptive, or to try to at least, you can't give away your play based on your personnel. So they're going to stick with the guys who they feel give them the best chance to do everything. And and as of now, it's Banks, it's Nair, it's Barney. Could we see the return of like an Isaiah Garcia Castaneda? Could we see Alex Bullock play more? He's proven that he can catch the football. Obviously, he's one of the better perimeter blockers on the team. Yeah, I think all of those things are open moving into the last 5 games.
Yeah, I think now is sort of the time for that. So we'll see if we see any different combinations coming up this weekend. One more before we take our final break here is from Michael on X. Is the 3-3-5 worth revisiting, since each of the next 3 teams Nebraska will play will have 2 weeks to prepare for it? Interesting way to look at it, I guess.
Well, you saw what Indiana did with an extra week to prepare for the 3-3-5, and I don't think that necessarily has all that much to do with why the Hoosiers had success against the Nebraska defense. Nebraska is mixing things up in with the 3-3-5 this year. The 3-3-5 in 2024 looks different than the 3-3-5 did in 2023, which looked different than what Tony White played in the year prior at Syracuse. So they're not going to scrap their defense because the opposition has some extra time to prepare for it. I think you're going to continue to see Nebraska try new wrinkles out of that defense, but as we've heard the players and the coaches, it's more the players, but as we've heard them say, yeah, I mean, it goes back several years, which maybe is discouraging because it hasn't produced a lot of wins in games that Nebraska really needs to win. They're going to focus on themselves. Like, I don't think they're going to necessarily look at whether their opponent has an extra week off and say, okay, here's what we need to do because UCLA or USC or Wisconsin has got a bye It's not Wisconsin, sorry. Ohio State and Indiana. Wisconsin will not be playing coming off a bye. The next three are. They're not gonna base their scheme off of that. But I do think that they could try to vary it up a little more, throw some wrinkles, try to find a way to show some things defensively and on the offensive side that those opponents aren't expecting to come.
Yeah, just to be clear, from my point of view, I don't think it was at all really Nebraska's scheme that got them, that made them look so bad against Indiana.
Although Tony White did say his scheme was completely stupid at times, but
yeah, I think they do some things sometimes where they're in this kind of grapple of, do we need to be simple or do we need to be complicated? And I think they probably got in their heads a little bit too much about Indiana, just what they do in the RPO game, and so I think generally Nebraska could just its players could afford to execute better, and it's up to the coaches to put them in those positions. I don't think it's a scheme issue. I don't think it's the fact that a 3-3-5 doesn't work against this or this. The point of the 3-3-5 is that it's multiple and it could show different fronts and different things all across the board. And that's a big advantage to the scheme. You can look different depending on what you want to look like on any given down. But Nebraska didn't execute anything on Saturday against Indiana. So no, not time for that question, I don't think.
Yeah. All right, let's come back after the break and take what I see as three more intriguing questions, very intriguing questions. We'll start with one when we return about the quarterback, Dylan Raiola. Okay, Mitch Sherman here to tell you about a fairly new sponsor of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. It is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with more than 5 million active viewers. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less. That's the question, more or less, to a 2 to 6 player stat projections, and then just watch the winnings roll in. So you have 2 to 6 players. You pick more or less on their stat projections. It could be yards, it could be touchdowns, and then you win. Right now, you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct selections. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury assistance policy. So your stay is in play. Even if one of your players gets injured, your bets stay in play. Pick Tyreek Hill, let's say, for more than 90 yards receiving. Pick Dak Prescott to throw for more than 263 yards. Try Josh Allen for less than 240. Maybe it's CeeDee Lamb for more than 96. You get the picture. Set your lineup, sit back, and then just watch it roll in. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONCollege on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Okay, we are back on this Thursday. Tomorrow will be our picks show, last episode of the week before Nebraska goes to Ohio State. Thanks for all of the questions that you sent in via various mediums. This one comes to us from Josh on YouTube. He says, is there any concern that Dylan Raiola might transfer, especially with the inept offensive line? Does his uncle's fate have any bearing? Okay, so we received a few questions like this within the YouTube portion of the comment section there. The comment section was quite dark on the Wednesday podcast, and this is a dark question. This is something, the portal, take Dylan out of the equation just for a second at the beginning of this answer. The portal is something that can't be taken for granted at this stage in college football with any player.
Right.
The assumption that they'll just stay because you believe they're committed to the program, especially now let's go back to Dylan. I'd say with a high profile player, a 5-star prospect who would have many options and many opportunities to earn a lot of money and get playing time and play alongside great players, maybe at a program that is winning more games if they were to look around. That said, Dylan has done nothing at Nebraska, to my knowledge, to make anyone question his dedication to the school.
That's
Like
right.
this talk right now, like these questions that are coming to us about this is nothing more than just paranoia. Like, I get it. We all know that he expects to play in a program that can help him be a first-round pick in 2 years. That's what he believes he's got at Nebraska. We will see how these next 5 games go before making any kind of an end of season, which is when this kind of stuff comes up with everybody, end of season assumption or statement about Dylan. But like, he's all in. Like, he's been all in on Nebraska, and that's where he's at now. Lots of players are, and then things change. But we have no reason to believe that's going to be the case with him.
Yeah, none at all. I think there's already such a pressure on Nebraska to win football games because it's Nebraska, and Rhule's talked about that and how, the state and its hopes and dreams sort of all rest upon the shoulders of the Nebraska football program. That's already quite a bit of pressure. But now to throw in like, yeah, well, if you don't do this, this, and this, and if you don't look this way, then you're going to lose the prized recruit of the last 25 years of the football program. Like, now it's just not something that you want on your mind yet. Now I will say, like, might we get to a point where like you have to talk about this and you have to think about it a little bit more? Yeah. Nebraska should feel an urgency to look better on offense to be better in the win column and like all that stuff. Definitely for this reason, but just not there yet.
Same goes for Ja'Cory Barney. Same goes for Carter Nelson. Same goes for Vincent Shavers, players who've come into the program in the last couple of years. Cam Lenhart, Prince William Uman-Millen. Like, all of these guys came in and would have options if they would go look around. You listen to Rhule talk about Gunnar Gatula last year and how he's a big offensive tackle and he redshirted. And if he would have gone into the portal after last season, like, he would have been a big money guy. Like, it's not just one player. Like, all of the players on your roster who would be coveted if they were free agents in college football, you need to feel the urgency in order to keep them around. Like, you have to pay attention to them. You have to show them love via NIL, via the coaching, daily interactions. Like, it's all got to be there. It's not just about one guy. And this is not just at Nebraska. Like, every school goes through this every offseason. I would say unfortunately, but like, that's just the reality of it. And in a lot of ways, it's beneficial to the players to have options, more options than they did. So that's where they're at.
Let's go to Joe here from Twitter. A question that is not as dark, but still dark. I like it. Would you rather Nebraska lose a game 56-7 as they did, or 9-7 as they did in Memorial Stadium in 2009 against Iowa State? 56-7 or 9-7 with 8 turnovers?
I'm taking 9-7 with 8 turnovers.
Yeah, I am too.
Having been at both of those games, the feeling, now they were both ugly and had bad vibes, but walk
losing
out of there
50 is just, it just sucks the soul. It is just, it's not fun. It's not, we've all lived in it now multiple times over the last decade. It's just, there's no redeeming qualities to it. And then you realize, then you're like, oh, what's real? What's not real? Yeah. You could take being messy, and you knew that Nebraska had a really good defense and all that stuff that year. Like, that was, one thing, but you lose by 2, it's better than losing by 49. It's simple.
Right. I mean, and I understand the question, and I understand why some people might want to answer it differently, because you say, hey, at least you were in the game and you feel you can no, I'm giving my argument. I suppose you can say on a 56-7 game, like, at least you weren't. I don't know. Maybe the other one pulls, like, is more heart wrenching.
Well,
I don't.
I get that all the time on my show. People don't want to be hurt. They in the 9-7 game, you're like, we can win. In the 56-7 game, you can't, from about the first 15 minutes or whatever it might be. If it was 62-3 against Ohio State in 2016, you knew you weren't going to win for the first 4 minutes, and at least then you can release yourselves from any from any care about that game in particular. This game, you're in it. The Iowa State game, you're in it all the way through, and you think you could win all the way down to the last second. You get your heart ripped out. I don't care about that. Like, you're not going to be physically injured from Nebraska losing by a point or 2 points. Like, it hurts. It hurts people. It hurts so bad losing by that much on that stage. Yeah,
give me a competitive game. Give me a competitive game every day of the week.
Every time.
Daryl on YouTube asks us, has Matt Rhule not told Marcus Satterfield what he expects and wants in a run game? Exclamation point, question mark, question mark, question mark.
I would imagine that the head coach and the offensive coordinator have communicated. With that being said, I do think there's a push and a pull there. Like, and I think both have sort of responsibility in that. Like, I think, if Satterfield wants to, thinks the best way to get yards and first downs and points is to throw it around, and Rhule says, hey, look, you got to see the long view here. You got to see the long picture. We're trying to play this 4-quarter game in a certain style. Like, Rhule's got to win that argument. So this is long been a thing in college football, long been a thing in football. Head coach, coordinator, what do the two want? How do the two view things? And so, yes, to answer the question, I think Satterfield knows what Rhule wants, but I think that picture could afford to be a little bit more clear. That's for sure.
This is, of course, in response to the Tuesday comments from Marcus Satterfield that he needs to commit more to the run game, that it's on him that Nebraska hasn't run the ball well in the last month. And, I think with Satterfield, I don't think that he was necessarily saying like, I've been hesitant to run it. Maybe that's what he was saying. I think he's more trying to do what Rhule did after the game and like take responsibility on himself and say, this is on me, blame me. And he's not as slick in front of the microphone, with the camera in his face as the head coach is, who's more of a speaker and has more experience doing that kind of stuff. And the message came out in a different way. Now, I'm not making excuses for him. Like I am taken aback by that comment on its face that he needs to commit more to the run game, because this is the 20th game now this week with these two, working together at Nebraska. So you should have been committed to the run game quite a while ago. And Nebraska was committed to the run game last year. I think it wanted to be committed to the run game this year, but to answer the question, I'm getting off topic here. To answer the question, yes, they talk about it. Satterfield understands what Rhule wants.
All right,
last
final comment here.
Yeah, I'll get to this last one. This is more of a comment than a question, although I think there's a question in here. So Zachary via email, we've been emailing back and forth for a while now, and Zachary's been outspoken in his lack of confidence about Garrett McGuire, wide receivers coach Satterfield, and special teams coordinator Ed Foley. Zachary did predict a big loss against Indiana, as he reminded us in his email this week. So pat on the back.
Nice.
Zachary, credit to him. This week, he reiterates to us that Nebraska cannot hire inexperienced, ineffective coaches and expect something they've never shown an ability to do. Development is for players. Coaches develop at lower levels, demonstrate a track record, then get hired based on that.
I just disagree.
I mean, that part of it is that part of it, like what he's saying about development. Like, I see your point, but I'll say the same thing I said last week, and I'll continue to say it until this is just proven not to work, because Nebraska, you picked this coach. So you are then married to the way that he wants to do things. And if you don't like it, you have to trust that he doesn't like it, and that then he's going to make a change. So if he sees something deficient or inefficient, which he does with certain coaches on the staff, then in his time, he's going to try to fix it. And I think as a fan, if you're a fan, I don't know, if you believe in Matt Rhule, then I think you have to believe not just in what he has to say, but how he handles his coaching staff.
I hate judging you could do this to a certain extent with the coordinators, because you could do that. But with the assistant coaches, you have what you have in your room. And if Garrett McGuire comes in and he's never coached a day of football in his entire life, and he's got Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase in his wide receiver room. What is he? Is he a good coach or is he a bad coach? You know, like people would say he's the best coach of all time, but it wouldn't be the truth, right? So like there's that piece of the conversation too, and I do think Garrett McGuire is a young up and coming guy who, and it is possible to develop, and coaches do it all the time and all that stuff. Like it's not linear. It's not as linear as people want it to be. And I know they do. And I know they want to do fantasy coach hiring and all that stuff, but it's just not how it works.
Yeah. I like how you put that. Good description there. All right. That's it for our mailbag show. We'll be back, as we mentioned, on Friday with picks and predictions for Nebraska at Ohio State and everything that's going on around the Big Ten and nationally here in Week 9. Thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On College Football Podcast. Spencer McLaughlin has got everything you need to get through this week and a full, exciting season. You can find the link to the Locked On College Football Podcast in the description of this show. There is no need to search. All of it is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.